Very good morning to everybody out there. Myself, Joya Khan, Ambassador of Change from GETI, and your host for this morning session. Holding the beacon of success and heralding the dawn of a new era, I bring greetings from the entire GETI fraternity. And as we usher in winds of change, it's my immense pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed speaker, Miss Isabel Rodriguez, on this live forum of Detox for educators. Miss Isabel is joining us all the way from Peru for this live session, and she will be condensing her thoughts on what do generations expect from education. Miss Isabel is an economist with experience in investment, planning, and open government, and is a specialist at the Ministry of Education. She is also having experience in complementary studies, and she is the winner in the category of Youth Leadership Awards 2021 of the Neapolitan Awards of the Washington Academy. She was a fellow in the Global Policy, Democracy, and Sustainability Program. So, a very warm welcome to you, Miss Isabel. We all know that molding the future generation of India is one of the most quintessential things that any country needs to undertake. And our generation at present is definitely leading the change in how learning takes place. They are a driving force in the innovation of new learning tools, teaching styles, and unlimited access to resources. And they are providing and they are proving that college is headed in the direction of a more learning centric environment where students will become the directors of the future. So, with this, I hand over the session to Miss Isabel so that she can condense her thoughts on what do generations expect from education. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much for the invitation, and I happy to share my different experience, and I happy to connect with other people with other country. And in this opportunity, I share the topics about my experience about in Latin America, and especially and around the world. And I start my presentation. The title is "What do generations expect from education?" I think that it's important to what is the focus, the new focus, or what is the different expectative with the young people about the education. Here, what do you really expect from education? Let's see what UNESCO tells us. With a view to the year 2050, UNESCO states that knowledge and learning are the greatest renewable resources available to humanity to respond to challenge and invent alternatives. I think that is important, these phrases. Okay, in this PPT, I chose the picture about the world because I considered 5 points that I is important to share. What is expectative around the world? What public policy is considered about that? What is the special political of education? Uh, what focus is important? What is the participating of students, teachers, and challenge and opportunity? In this part, we will see some points that I consider important to be able to see what is happening at the world level, what policies are being implemented. So, what are the two important points in terms of education system? It focuses on students, on teachers, and their challenge and opportunity. And it's on why each country can be affected. Um, in the third PPT, okay, I I don't know if it's so okay. Um, Within the goals established in the Sustainable Development Goals, we are going to focus on some points that I consider important. Since the points focus on access to primary education, preschool education, access to technical education, higher education, or university. I choose 4 points about that. goal targets about the SDG for the quality of education. Because I think that is important. It's not only a focus about the regular education. I think it's important to consider that what is a technical education, what is the education at universities, for example, and what strategies or what opportunities to know or to consider about the teachers and students. By 2030, ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, quality primary and secondary education, leading to rebel and goal for effective learning outcomes. Two, ensure that all girls and boys have access to quality early childhood development, care, and primary education, so that they are ready to primary education, and ensure equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational, and tertiary education, including university, and substantially increase the supply of qualified teachers, include through international cooperation for teacher training in development countries, especially less development countries. I consider four points, but in this goal, I have more than 4 points, but I think it's important to share. And I consider this picture because I think that what is the statistics is important, or what is the return to education now and some years ago. But we must not forget that in order to access education, it's necessary to create equal spaces for all, such as having equal opportunities in urban and rural areas. Speaking for of the geographic space, as this is important to focus. Now, when we also mention equal opportunities, it's not necessarily access to basic education; it is also access to special education, and to think about children with disabilities, and we must give the priority that they have an adequate space for the development of learning. But it's important too. Focuses on all levels of education implies that as a country we want to close gaps. Coverage and quality are two complementary concepts, since we have to analyze not only educational space, how much furniture is needed as an educational institution, is an infrastructure level. What is the territorial approach that is provided, since geographically there are areas with different characteristics. Uh, where the costume and use the educational spaces can be adaptable to some or not for all, considering that the climate can play an important role. Now, in the case of closing the quality gap, here already implies what quality of education we want to give to students. It is a focus on learning, requires many factors, especially the important participation of teachers, and who ultimately play the role of mentor or facilitators who will teach in the classroom, and that is planned in the national curriculum. It's important to recognize that what is the objective of the national curriculum. But in the last years, for example, in Peru, exists a different change. And what is the main focus about the curriculum nation? In the next slide, I choose next slide. Okay, I identify some points about the future education. What is the quality? What is the motivation about students to study? What's the motivation to create the new perspective for the future? The analysis is the principal word because in the curriculum national, uh, independent of the step of the education, it's important to recognize what is the analyze the situation about the community, what is analyze about the situation about the project, the programs, what happened about my community, what problems did you have in my reality situation, etc. The technology and learning. The learning is important to change between the teacher and student because I think that you recognize that what is the important or the principal methodology to the teacher to share with the student. And what is the focus about the objectives of the courses or different courses, mathematics, in communication, etc. And the technology, I think that it's important to recognize that technology is the long phrase, the long word what the share in the different education in the school, at university is important too. What is the importance of technology in the primary school, in the secondary school, or in different spaces? Um, I think that, for example, the UNESCO in 2019 established on one document what I is important to comment. Remaining of future together area a new social contract for education. The Education Future Initiative. The Future of Education Initiative. The International Commission of the Future of Education was created by UNESCO in 2019 to reinvent how knowledge and learning can transform the future of humanity and the planet. The initiative incorporates broad public and expert participation and aims to catalyze a global debate on how education should be retooled in a world of increasing complexity and uncertainty on practice. Um, where it mentioned fundamental principle and which I consider necessary to share, guaranteeing the right to quality education through life, and reinforce education as a public and common good. And what will be the proposed to renew the education? I think that 2 points. For example, I mentioned about the learning and the different methodologies to learn. Uh, pedagogy should be organized around the principle of cooperation, collaboration, and solidarity. And curriculum should emphasize ecological, intercultural, and interdisciplinary learning that helps a different students to access to and produce knowledge. And it's important in relation with analyze. What is the important to produce new knowledge while developing their capacity to critique and apply it? What is create a space to different a different space to share or what or understand to students what is that you the capacity to understand this situation or different situation. According to the World Bank, education refers to the which generates high and constant return. In terms of the income, and is the most important factor in ensuring equality of opportunity. It promotes employment, income, health, and poverty reduction. Globally, hourly earnings increase by 10% each additional year of school. I think that's important to focus. What is the future education? Or what is the considered important? Employment is important, income and health and project. In principal poverty education. Developing countries have made enormous strides in getting children into school, and the number of children in school has increased worldwide. However, I highlighted in the World Development Report in 280. In the next PPT, I consider it is important to public policy identify the students and teachers because I write about this part about what is important to the teacher, what is important to empower teacher, and what is the role about the student in relation with the empowered teacher. Education is important for the development of country, and that is the future. It allows the empower of children and adolescents, and for this, the government must invest in the sector, but with a more inclusive approach, creating opportunities for all, generating adequate capacity to promote good performance in the educational system. That is important focus. It is In this point, what is the new or the good performance to the system or education system? Globalization linked mainly to technological change and allows for new ways of approaching education. The children and adolescents are identified to position and acquire other skills to learn new ways to provide real solutions. It's not only based on mathematical or verbal learning or communication or on other subjects in the school, but to enhance the skill of each of them and give recognition in what they can be good at, which is why there are skills that the child or adolescent has to develop according to the educational level achieved. According to the Peruvian national curriculum, and this focus is important, for basic education establishes the total approximately 29 competencies that must be achieved, focused mainly on problem solving, generating communication skills, that is important, interpretation of text, personal management skills, and above all, having social skills that allow them to interact and lead. In addition, this learning process requires pedagogical guidelines for for the teaching and learning process, as well as for the tutoring process, or what is identified, for example, in the teaching. Because in Peru, in the primary school, consider is not only teacher, is I consider them in addition a tutor because it's I think it's important. In order to the new generation to take advantage of what the government invests in education, it's necessary to recognize those economic resources that are designated are to increase capacities in the different areas of knowledge. According to the World Bank information on research and development spending of the year 220 correspond 2.60% approximately of world GDP, while Peru in 220 percent 0.16% of GDP. But the difference is I think is more different. However, for Peru, this expenditure have been growing in the last 5 years. Since in 2015 it was 0.12% of the world GDP. But the difference between 216 and in relation 220, what is 2 years ago, is the difference is not more like 0.5%. While it is required potential human capital to children and adolescents, but teachers need to generate an adequate learning process, which is planned, which is executed, and finally the teacher and the students are evaluated. For this, they need strategies, different strategies that allow them to involve the student, so that they know what is being done. Value knowledge promote participation and in practical exercise such as generation of projects or analysis of cases of the different cases of studies allow the teacher to get to know their student and establishes the best teaching learning methodology. But is and I focus in that in my new perspective or my perspective about the function or the principal function about the teacher. And to achieve the ultimate goals of teacher or and learning with expected results, different expected, it is necessary to provide the necessary support to the teacher, to have good teacher training as one of the indicators mentioned in the documents of the state of public policies for teachers in Honduras, for example, to promote learning in the classroom through mentoring, which empower them and generate shared knowledge. that transmitting in the to a student. And and the finally teacher innovate. And this is important word in this at the moment. Have the freedom and transparency to create and propose better methodologies for teaching. And I according to UNESCO, but I share with some points what is the new or reviewed educational policy focusing on five aspects, which I will give a brief commentary about on each of them according to my experience. For example, the over education of the educational system, the teaching policy and capacity building of teacher and school on the school principals, a curriculum development, what is the languages proficiency, global teaching, tolerance and civic education. I recognize that the curriculum development is focused in civic education. In Peru, for example, in the last years, for example, what's the one of wasn't a principal problem in the public sector because in the curriculum doesn't exist the civic education, but I think that is, for example, other organization, NGOs or other organization or the civil society create space, create projects, create programs about the civic education, but it's important because it's I think that is when I was a child, I recognized what is the different behavior and in since as a child, or what is the problem about my community, or what is the good behavioral here or at the moment or the different situation. But it's necessary to recognize what is the focus about the new expected. The fourth point is assessment policy and evaluation for example, the PISA, what is I think that is important to evaluation the different countries, but for example, Latin American in Peru or other country about uh, in that for example, the results about PISA is not good, but have problem in different situation about in focus on mathematics communication. I think that is a low result because is less indicators or I feel it's a different problems because all schools or all politics focuses in the increase the percent of the, for example, indicator of PISA, but I think I think it's necessarily recognized, but it's important. Yes, but I think that other capacity for the children, for the students, for example, some students have the different skills to the picture, to the arts, or the other subjects, or the other special. But I think that it's not necessary to focus on the percent or the number. I think if the number is the line, the basic line, what happened in what education. But I think that what is the situation about the student, or who, or what is the situation about the family of the student, or what is the problem in the learning in the case of the student has a different parent to knowledge to learn bad or good. But it's necessary to recognize different problems, not focus in the number. That and finally, I think that the technology, or for example, what is the learning or the new focus uh, with the technology. Uh, I think that in the 2 years ago, I have the pandemic situation, but the resolution of the learning was very very easy or to adapt a new technology or use that new technology. But I think that is that training was uh, very difficult to the teacher because I think that is the first situation is about the teacher. What is the problem about adapt to the technology of the teacher and to share with the students? But I think that is what's of both problem in a different country. And in the next yes, in the next PPT, and I choose a challenge and opportunity. And when I mention access to that internet or technologically device, the social emotional competences and teaching methods of the virtual environment. I think that these are 3 points to important of what is a new focus about in the future. At the present, I think that is have the different parents to adapt that 3 points, and I have the challenge to the social emotional competence. Um, According to the studies established by the Economic Commission of Latin America and the Caribbean, or the ECLAC, some challenges have been identified which refer to lack to access to the internet and technological device. What is the comment now? La transition to the internet and technology device. Yes. What is the transition to distance and online educational and insufficient adaptation of the different methodology or to the virtual environment. And finally, I considered that, for my experience, I think that the principal challenge, in the case of the reality of the different countries, what politicals do you consider important now for the future? I said social and emotional competence because now I see the difference in different schools that the virtual session is important, but the hybrid situation, okay. But what is the view about the children in home or at home or in the school, or for example what kind of strategy, not only of the political strategy, what is the strategy at the school, what is the function of the director of the school about this point, this emotional competence, and what is the problem about the psychology between what is the uh, proposal of the new focus about the psychological situation, for example, what is important or I think is relevant role about the father, parents, and the director, the teachers, students, and it's important to consider other stakeholders participate in some initiatives, in some programs, and I recognize the role about the NGO because in about 2 years ago or 1 year ago, I recognize the principal role about the NGOs because the focus identifies the focus about education, identifies the other sector, for example, the health or on environment, and but I think that recognize that education is more important. In the case of access to the internet and technological evidence, I think that now exists the different problems between the rural area or the other sector or geographical structure because the internet is not or can't of people use and because it's difficult to access to the principal access to the internet and to access to the technology. Or what is the, for example, in some propose about the public sector and 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 share the different laptop or tablets in different zones of geographical participation. And I think that is a principal problem is identify what is the poverty people that that I have internet, and what is the principal problem about that? Is need to this laptop or this tablet, and finally, what is the challenge about the different methods or methodology to the teacher? Because what is the new vision about the adapt to the curriculum, for example, or what is the new focus about the innovation in a methodology? And I think that is a good challenge, but it's necessary to create different spaces too. It's not only with the public sector, it's not only with the SDG, because SDG have the different initiatives, but it's not have the budget, for example, as SDG. And it's necessary to participate in the private sector. But in different initiatives, the focus is important to or what is the objectives to the different programs or different projects. Is only the school, the students, or what is the impact to the future about the students? But it's a most important question. But I focus what is the impact to here now in the school and in the future. And thank you so much for these spaces, and I have happy to share my experience about share uh, some points about education, and it's important to identify uh, uh, what is the new opportunity to the students, or what is the challenge about in the school, on the university, for example. I do mention more aspects of the university because it's other, it's really other focus. But I think that this needs to consider that importance of the patient. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miss Isabel, for that wonderful presentation. In your presentation, you have covered most of the points, like about the expectations that the generation has from education from around the world, like public policy, students, teachers, challenges, and opportunities. You also spoke about the goal targets. By 2030, what all is going to take place? Then you have spoken about the education for the future, which involves quality, motivation, technology, learning, analysis. You also spoke about the public policy where both students and teachers are greatly involved and they have their due contributions. Then you mentioned about your challenges and opportunities like access to the internet and the technological devices, the socio-economical competencies, and teaching methods to the virtual environment. So there were very, very relevant points that you took up. And we all know that as a digital generation, this generation expects digital learning tools such as these to be deeply integrated into their education. For them, technology has always been a fully integrated experience into every part of their lives. And they don't think that education should be any different. So a lot of expectations are there. They look up to the educators, the policymakers to bring about a lot of transformation to be able to, so that they are able to access freely. They believe they should be able to seamlessly connect with academic experiences to their personal experiences through the same tools. Additionally, they expect that these learning tools be available on demand and with low barriers to access. For them, learning isn't limited to just the classroom now these days. It's something that can take place anywhere, anytime. So I hope our students, our young and ignited minds have been keen listeners. Our educators have also lent their ears to the presentation and to the thoughts and views of Miss Peru, who was here to join us, who is here to join us all the way from Peru, Miss Isabel. And thank you so much for being there, for having taken out time. And I would like to thank our viewers too, who were here and who joined us for this session. And we are really happy to see that people are excited for the Getty Talks, and they look forward to the presentations, to the speakers, and they have their own queries at times. So, ma'am, we would be delighted if you can take one or two questions from us, Miss Isabel.
Yes, okay. Yes, I'm happy to share my experience here. Um, in additional, in you comment about the focus about the student, that the technological, for example, situation. What is the perspective, for example, to adapt between the teacher and student? That is important because it identifies in according my experience. For example, I had the opportunity to work in a different geographical zone. For example, with poor people, but I think that these people have the different knowledge about the education, but I think that is focused about that. What is the problems about the mathematics and result? Or what is the, for example, three times of the, for example, past tense or the present tense about the communication. But is that I think that is has a problem about that. What is the new expectative? What opportunity to consider to know other vision about with the for example, the people need to that technological situation, need to the new perspective about the internet. I think that is a good idea to recognize the importance. And in this space, I think that the government have the different program. What is the expectative about the infrastructure education? I think it's the focus is in the infrastructure, but what is the in addition to the capacity to education, and what is about the spaces? What is the good um, what is the good solution or the best opportunity to the students. And here in Peru, for example, the expectative is good because it's not it identifies it not only what is the best infrastructure to students, but consider about the capacity and I think that is interactive with the teachers. And in these spaces, I think that is the methodology to teachers is important. And I think, for example, I see about the different project um, about the education, but the focus is the more infrastructure. But I still recognize that what is important to the teachers, or what perspective or the what policies identifies to recognize and generate impact for the future of the student. And thank you so much, Hoya.
There's a question. There's a question. What sort of problems and obstacles do the present generation students encounter? And how do you think they can overcome it?
Okay. Yes, yes, I heard the question. Okay. And I think that for example, I identify the different problem about Latin American and with the different problems about the other countries. But for example, in the countries in development, I think that the focus or the most important focus is about the create a space to to share the objective about um, for example, the PISA or the percent or what is the challenge to increase the percent. But the focus in the Latin American, I think that is on only countries in the development country. I think that is a focus about this, but I think that is more expectative about other skills, for example, and I identifies, for example, in comparison with the countries in the United States, for example, or the Europe, in countries in Europe, the focus is different. And for example, the education between, for example, environmental education. What is a problem about the environmental education here? I think that is in Peru. Recognize that I have the document about these topics, but it's not only intensive about the different students, for example. But I think that is more topics about the challenge about education. And I recognize that, for example, Latin American, I have the expectations to increase that. For example, this point about the evaluation is good or is bad, but I think that is more easy, more expectative about other topics. For example, when in Peru, for example, I have the 25 regions, and Lima is the capital of the Peru. And I, for example, the percent of the communication mathematic skills about the students in 200, in three, I don't remember the year exactly, but I think that is on 217 or 16. The result was less than other region, but the teacher have a question. What happened about the situation? What is the situation about the student? Because I think that this in Lima have, for example, the student have the different or the best technology, the best infrastructure, or the best capacity to know to learn. Or what is the difference about the other region? Is I think I curious because in this region I don't know is it Ayacucho or only or what only region. For example, in this region, and have a different students, but it not have a good infrastructure of and don't have the good capacity to knowledge. But the difference between two regions was different. I think that I think that it's important to recognize the role about the teacher, that innovate the different subjects or different skills about the teacher. I recognize the importance to the teacher. I see that is a good example to recognize the role about the schools or the teachers, but I think that is important the decision, the capacity of decision, and I recognize this as more easy example, and I see that this new expectative to all education.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And thank you, dear viewers, for being with us. With this, I sign off. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Stay blessed. Thank you so much.